Blessings of Light. I'm Reverend Harrison Roy Hesketh, and you're about to see a lecture. When we begin the path, sometimes we do not know, for the path is windy, and we do not see the bends or the end. But as we travel the path, it becomes straight and narrow until we reach our goal. Sit back and intensify now your attention, concentration, observation into a meditative state, and open your contemplative and superconscious natures to absorb blessings.
Tonight on April the 16th, 1979 at 2500 Poly Highway is the universe is an infinite number of radiant lines of light in the form of electromagnetic lines. Everything that is light radiates. All the radiant lines are touching and supporting one another. In your body of light, these become the electromagnetic highways to the stars, planets, other beings, and God. And tonight we'll be talking about stepping into light, thatness, the cosmic principle, the mind principle, the intellect principle, the ego principle, and mind stuff, and the bands of light and energy around the planet, and light body and astral body projection, and the structure of the atom and the movement of consciousness within the various levels of atoms. And we'll be also talking about the blue pearl and the movement of the spirit body. Tonight we're talking about light body projection, astral projection. But before we get into that, I was studying in the science of the soul, or I think it's Jaiva Nana in the Hindu teachings, which is the science of the soul, about the Antakarana, which is a bridge in consciousness moving from the outer to the inner self, and then from the heart to the crown chakra. This Antakarana moves, and it has four basic energies that move over that Antakarana: the cosmic principle, the mind principle, the intellect principle, and the ego principle moves over that Antakarana. It's called Atman, Buddhist, Manas, and I can't remember the name for the ego principle, but they all, and the mind stuff was called Chidam. So I to the English terms so that I can tell you more in that way than I can by relating the Hindu terms or the Buddhic terms or the Christian terms or this. So I'm going to just relate it to you in English, because I learned this in many different fields of training. Not only the Hindu teachings, but the Tibetan teachings on the Antakarana or the Rainbow Bridge, the Nordic teachings from Egypt, and teachings from Atlantis, and many different places to bring this information to you. In atomic theory, the atom's structure is electrons floating around a nucleus, which is comprised of a proton and a neutron. The electrons floating around this nucleus is known as your electronic body, and this electronic body can transfer energies from one atom to another. In the center here is the proton, which is an atomic particle, and it is your atomic body. In the neutron is the neutral body, and then there's a space in between here, and this is thatness, spirit, unconditioned, pure consciousness, which we call tat-toi, or that. Because my name is Tat, T-A-T means that, thatness. This means literally thatness. And so it's thatness in here that is generated, that comprise and impacts as these other levels of experience or being or form. So from the formless, form comes into manifestation. It comes through our cosmic principle of consciousness, this thatness coming in through this neutral plane, because God's neutral in all things, or He's in all things, in the center of all things, and it has no weight or no up or down or no dimension, as we know dimensions. The mind principle is the first principle that holds this thatness and cosmic principle in form. So you've heard me say before, the mind holds all things in form. The mind holds all things in form. So when we are creating from nothing into something, the nothing is really something, it's that. And so we're creating from that, thatness, into form, or God in His unmanifest form into the mind, and then the mind holds all things in form. The intellect principle, or Buddhi principle, is the omniscience, or how all things are working within the mind. And so as the mind holds all things in form, the intellect then gives it description, or describes it, or it has a set matrix that it can express through, where you can take and describe the form by this knowingness of it. Or in this principle here, it's knowing all things. The ego principle is the individual like you and I that are drawing upon these other levels of consciousness, and we're drawing them into the self, the ego principle, or self. Now this isn't the personality principle, as we that is illusion is passing. We're talking about the ego principle that is everlasting. It is the self in you. And so we are drawing this other forces into the self through an expression of mind stuff. The mind stuff is all of these forms within that, everything that is comprised of this Chittamore mind stuff. How that relates is this. At this level, there is no atom structure. Here, there is the atoms are very light and vague in their structure, and as they come down through each one of the principles, they get denser and denser until they are taking solidity through the ego principle and coming through the mind stuff here that the ego principle, the intellect principle, and the mind principle take and work with. So they form as trees and rocks and elemental forces upon this planet. The Chittamore mind stuff forms in your automobiles and your relationships and everything. It is that, and it's the principle within that. What you're simply doing is you're reversing this process when you're doing a transference of consciousness. Now we've heard the word astral projection. Actually, you're not really projecting anything. It's already there. What you're doing is you're transferring. You're transferring your attention from a physical focus to a focus in the astral plane or mental plane or in the spiritual plane. You're transferring attention, concentration, observation, meditation, contemplation, and superconscious awareness. You are transferring those principles of your sevenfold self into these other levels of atoms, which are not physicalized atoms. We have emotional atoms, we have mental atoms, we have spiritual atoms. And the physical atoms we can see and touch with the physical plane. The emotional atoms we can feel and touch with our emotional body. The mental atoms, thoughts are things you can touch, and they become solid to the mind. So each of these planes are solid relative to the experience upon them. When your monopoly of consciousness is there, that plane is more solid. When you're dreaming, the dream state is more solid than the physical state, because you have more attention, more concentration, more observation, more merging with that plane, more creative energy there, more super consciousness there. As you transfer, pay more attention to your dreams. So that plane becomes very solid to you. So the dreams are real, just like this physical dimension is real. Thoughts are real. Everything is real. And so you are taking and moving away from illusion and things that aren't to what is in reality truth. Around this planet, the structure of this planet is so comprised that we have the densest as the physical ball of the planet. And the atmosphere gets finer and finer and finer until it touches space. The physical planet itself is our physical contact here. And so we are physically walking upon the planet, we're building upon the planet, and so this comprises our physical manifestation. From the surface of the planet at sea level, and you have some mountains that will go over this altitude, to 2,000 feet, and I think we've all got this at one time before in the astrophysics training, is you have an astral belt. These are atoms that are finer than the physical atom, not as dense, that make and comprise the elemental forces of the earth and the water and so on and so forth that we see in solidity here, or even the air, which is air in its construction. But you have an astral belt around this planet that goes up to 2,000 feet. And if you notice that people closer around the sea level are more in emotional strata and physical strata, then the people get up higher in the mountains. And the higher you get in the mountains, the more you get into the environmental consciousness, higher abstract consciousness, and so on and so forth. Those spacing out, trailing along in the mountains, they like to get away from people. The next belt of energy that we have goes from 2,000 feet to 6,000 feet, and this is like reason, logic, thinking, calculating part of mind force that is held to the planet. Now, people that are walking around on the planet are doing this. They are sending their antennas up. And here, they are sending their antenna up into astral force, and if they begin to think, they're just feeling walking around on the earth. But when they start thinking, their antennas go up into that strata. So now they're picking up that strata around the planet. They're picking up that kind of consciousness. And so now they get to think. It takes us from crawling on the earth to standing up on the earth before we start setting our antennas up enough to get this thinking strata. And we have to be attuned there. And we're attuned there, nature itself, by our mothers, our fathers, by societies, by groups of people, so on and so forth. You're attuned to this thinking strata. And this thinking strata has in it basic forces that cause, and if you were an English person, you would be thinking in English. If you were in other languages, some other person's thinking in some other language, you would get the same principle, but interpreted through that language. Now, as this person starts to awareness of consciousness, their antenna starts going up a little higher, where they start reaching up into a higher strata of consciousness, and they bring this strata down, which is from 6,000 to 9,000 feet, and this is an environmental strata. Some people just can't get to that altitude, and some people, if they go up in the mountains, their nose bleeds and everything else, they got to get back to the lower levels, closer to the Earth's surface, you see, because it's too thin for them there. Their consciousness is too dense, and it's being drawn off. And if you notice, some people can't stand it in the mountains. The environmental energies where their aura is spread out. Their auras are really tight down here at the earth level. They're a little more expanded in the astral level, and they get a little more expanded in the mind level. And when they get in this environmental mind, it's even more expanded. So each of these levels is a more expanded, because it's drawing more and more forces into the aura to expand the aura. So you are not just drawing the dense, you're starting to draw finer and finer substance. From 9,000 feet to 12,000 feet, now we're pulling an abstract consciousness or higher mind consciousness, ideas. And a lot of writers go up into the mountains to write and do things like this, or they reach that altitude in consciousness by their attitude. And if you're flying an airplane, they use those same terms, attitude and altitude. Your attitude towards the horizon will give you your altitude that you're going to be climbing to. So when you have a higher attitude in consciousness, you are drawing higher and finer elements of consciousness to fill your aura with. So your antenna is going up a little bit higher. You're going a little bit higher in consciousness. And you get into this abstract force here. In this 12,000 foot level, we take in and we began to, we start getting clearer ideas, we get more creative power. We're not as confined to these lower planes, and so we got to watch it. We don't start spacing out because we have an expanded mind at these higher levels. There's no limits to what we can really do. But then when we bring it down here in these other planes, then we're limited by how much we are identified with these lower planes. Some people are running around with their antennas way up in consciousness. They got a line of light coming right out of the top of their head that is feeding from the mind force into the brain, so the brain can calculate it and use it on the physical dimension. They take and they use this and they start spacing out. They walk around spacing out. Oh, everything's wonderful, it's beautiful, those kind of things. See? And if you notice that people live at those higher levels are more spiritually oriented or have a broader abstract consciousness. They have an abstract consciousness. Like our friends in Tibet and things like that in the high Himalaya mountains. Or even in the Andes or the mountains. And you notice that mountains are predominant within the sites of spiritual centers, like Mount Shasta and the Grand Tetons and Lake Titicaca and the Andes Mountains and the Himalaya Mountains and that are all very high spiritual centers, and they have a lot of spiritual things going on there, or abstract or higher mind things going on there than people down at the sea level does. When you get up here into the strata that goes up from 12,000 to 20,000 feet, you're reaching into a higher spiritual strata. This strata here deals with spirit force, and it deals with spiritual forces, and some say the heavens in this area. When the Russian cosmonaut went up there, he says, well, he didn't see heaven on his radar screen, so he didn't believe there was any such thing. But you notice that sounds like a physical point of view, doesn't it? We're not looking at a physical point of view. This is a metaphysical or beyond the physical point of view. And so when you're reaching up into that altitude, you're getting spiritual wisdoms and consciousness that relates to all these lower dimensions of consciousness. Each one of your chakras, as they open, you also get more and more of these higher stratas too, because it heightens this line of energy that you're walking around the planet with. Now as we move into the next level here, about 20,000 feet, we start moving into the universal mind strata. And a lot of people get real spiritual. They get filled with the Holy Spirit, and they start talking in tongues. Because in this universal mind strata, the first thing you reach is all the bands of language from the beginning of time till now. And you have all these bands, the now going into the ancient languages. And so you have all those accumulation of thought impulse forms still around this planet at that level. And so when you're there, you maybe start talking in tongues and you don't know, oh, it's so spiritual and all this. You're bringing it through your spiritual abstract mind, through your environmental consciousness down into your thinking mind and your emotional body, and then bringing it to physical manifestation through sound, through running the impulse that you're getting from this higher level over through letting it vibrate the air that goes over your vocal cords, and then you may start talking in tongues or some other language. And I know at times I was giving readings, I'd be going deeper and deeper and going back in the Akashic light, and I would pick up another language and I'd be reading, and when we played the tape back, we were both understanding each other. When we played the tape back, there was this foreign language on the tape, and I was speaking this foreign language. That happened about 3 years ago, and I only did it half a dozen times till I realized I had to keep pushing deeper into universal mind. Once we reach above all these languages and that strata, we reach a basic mind principle of human mind. The human mind, the one mind of humanity. And in this principle here, the Buddhic principle as it applies to this planet, or intellect principle as applies to this planet, we are getting basic impression of consciousness and awareness. And as we get the basic impression, then it will come through our interpretation by what language we speak or the way we articulate as we bring it through the various levels of consciousness. Now, if there's a level here that's anemic or is not developed or is not getting fed as much as another level, it'll kind of, like a bottleneck, it'll take and cut off some of those impressions as it comes down to you, and you get bits and pieces instead of a steady channel. And so you are creating a channel of light. And by meditating in the same place at the same time, and that you are building a channel much more efficiently into these higher stratas. And that's why we give you an altar to set up, and why we said to meditate at a particular time, and so on and so forth. So you could build this line of energy up into this higher strata, so you could pull upon these forces. Now, as you get past this plane, as it applies to the physical dimension, you start going into a plane that deals with cosmic consciousness. And when you pull into this white light radiance around the planet, you are now getting white light consciousness, getting aware of that. So it may seem dark to you when you first start out, and it gets lighter and lighter until you have this bright light. You notice when we first go inside, it's dark, and what we're doing is we're turning that darkness into light. Because when you're not looking through the physical eyes, you are now perceiving. You have to be looking somewhere all the time, because the spiritual eye is never closed. The physical eye is open and closed, but the spiritual eye never closes. It is always open. And so the eye of the self, the true identity of God that is in you, is always open. And so this eye can always see. And it can see all the other levels, because it is bringing the energy from the sun, converting it into the impulses that radiate the other rays down to the planet's surface. Now you get a master that takes and focuses on a particular ray. He reaches out through this cosmic force out into the universal structure, and he'll pull upon a particular colored ray. If he's pulling on first ray power, he'll be pulling the blue ray. If he's pulling on second ray power, he'll be pulling on the golden ray. And if he's pulling on the third ray power, he'll be pulling on the pink ray. And so you have those three flames, the threefold flame of the cosmic forces. And he's pulling upon one or all of those. If he's drawing white light from the cosmic forces, he may be bringing that white light, because it is on condition and pure, into manifestation through a blue ray principle. You see, truth and reality and peace and harmony and rhythm and vibration. And that master will use the things of that, like mantras and songs and meditating on peace and bringing harmony to the world and expressing through that power, the Shaktipat, or power of the universe, you see. And so each master that lived, like El Moria, and today we have a blue ray master like Muktananda upon the planet, he pulls this blue ray to the Earth's surface, and there he attunes other people to vibrate like that, so their antenna will go out there and pull that same principle. The more you pull it, the broader this line gets. Now that principle is also within this structure here. It is already touching the Earth's surface. That blue ray would already be touching. Here he's getting in a pure cosmic psychic force, puts it in and pulls it in individual logos or individual ego principle, you see. Brings that down. He must have a step-down transformer for each of those levels of consciousness. And so here's a master, and you may say, oh boy, I wonder if I'll ever get as high as this master, you see. Well, I learned this a long time ago, and I didn't learn it from physical masters. Though I had a lot of physical masters that confirmed me, and that's what's happened to me, I learned it from spiritual beings that came to me, my guides and my spiritual beings. Now, I wanted to go astral traveling, like probably a lot of you like to go astral traveling. But I was afraid of the unknown. I didn't know what was going to happen to my body when I got out of it. I didn't know if I was going to walk in that wall, materialize in the wall. I didn't understand the levels of consciousness. And so I kept praying. I wanted a guide. I wanted someone to show me. And I kept asking people on the earth, and none of them could really tell me. I didn't know the masters of the East and that then. I'd got out of my body, and I'd been doing it, but I didn't realize I was doing that. And I wasn't doing it, I wasn't traveling the astral belt at the level I wanted to travel at. I was still bound to earth images of the astral plane. So when I got out, I'd be walking around on the earth still. But I wanted to go on the astral plane where you could create things and where you could have other experiences of consciousness, because the density is closer to the earth gives you earth images, closer to the mind gives you mental power of the astral plane. And so this plane has equal parts of physical astral force. It has 7 levels to it. The first three deal with the physical, moving up into more etherical levels, and then astral or emotional levels into mental levels. And in the mental levels, there's no forms, there are light fields. And then when you get into the mind force, there are fields of light that are luminous and alive within themselves, and you're traveling within that without the benefit of a physical looking body. And so I would get out in perception in some of these areas, and I'd see things and experience things by impression, but they didn't have the forms of the physical dimension for me to relate to. So, so I kept praying for guides to come and help me. And I got up into this violet fire by praying to and chanting the blaze, violet fire, blaze chant of Saint Germain, and kept asking for that power and asking for him to guide me. So he started taking me out of my body, and I'd go to places like the Grand Tetons. I went to Lake Titicaca. I went to Shasta. I went to those kind of places. I went to a place in, I forget the name of the mountain now. It's in Australia. I went with Saint Germain there as well. And he would come and he'd say, when I'd be in my meditation, he'd say, be out of your body, standing in front of your body at a certain time, and I will take you. And so when I'd go in my like I'd meditate in the morning, he'd say, tonight at 8 o'clock, be out of your body, and I'll take you on an experience. Know what you want to do. And so I remember, oh, what am I going to do? The first thing I was going to do is I wanted to see the books of prophecy that David saw, you see. So I says, I want to see the books of prophecy. So at 8 o'clock, I'd been practicing just stepping out of my body and back in, stepping out of my body and stepping back in. I was standing there and I was waiting, and Saint Germain materialized, and he took my hand, we floated right up through the ceiling, right outside, and we started traveling, and it started moving very quickly, and I noticed that now we were coming out of a cloudy, misty kind of energy down into a more solidified energy, and saw the ground, and we went down into this ground, which he said was in the Holy Land. And down into these caves we went. We were under the ground, and we were in these caves, and there was this book, the Book of Prophecy, and I thought it was like our books that opened this way, but it opened this way. And I went over there, and I was able to open the book, but I couldn't read it. It was in another language. And he says, well, you asked to see it. You didn't ask to read it. And so I found out at that point, you have to be very precise with what you want to experience. It's more exacting than this physical dimension. And these get more and more exacting. The deeper and deeper in you get, they are exactly what they are. They're not diluted by what we call tolerances. The tolerances get less and less and less as you get higher and higher and higher. They get more exacting. And so in consciousness, you find that, gee, it used to take a while for things to come into manifestation. Now you've got to watch what you say, because what you say starts coming into being. Then you've got to watch what you think, because then thinking comes into being. Now, then the next thing you do, you have to watch what you imagine, because what you imagine will come into being. You see, as you open each one of these chakras and progress higher and higher, these things become solid to your experience, no matter what dimension you are in. If you're on the physical dimension and there are 5,000 people who are hungry out there, you start concentrating up here and imagining that they have an endless supply of fishes and that, or as much as they need, coming out of these baskets, like Jesus did. Then out comes the food, and he ends up with 17 baskets when he started out with 3 fishes and 2 loaves or something like that. I forget how many it was at this point, but he started out with so many fishes and so many loaves and ended up with a multiple of that and fed 5,000 people as well. Because the imagination now takes and makes transfiguration by the dropping of the atoms from these higher forces down and taking and affecting the lower atoms and causing their vibrations to assimilate the higher vibration. Whichever the monopoly of consciousness is in affects the atoms of the other planes. If you're predominantly an emotional person, it'll affect all the other planes of your consciousness. If you raise to your center of response to an intellectual person, that will affect your plane. If you raise it to a soulful person, then those atoms will affect the other atoms. You understand what I'm saying? If you get into a creative energy, then the creative atoms will affect your environmental atoms, your thinking, your emotional atoms, your physical atoms. You notice that? And you'll even notice that you dress different because you are in a different area of consciousness than that. People that get in higher and higher levels of consciousness, when they get up here in the abstract plane, did you ever notice how some people that are very abstract dress very abstract? With very blazing colors and different shapes to their clothes than other people, you see? Because it depends on what level you're in here. The people are in system here. They got suits and ties, and they're all walking around. Emotional people there, they got kind of baggy clothes and stuff. And the earth people, man, they got to have something that if it gets a little dirty or something, it just looks like the earth. Because they run around their ODs and stuff like that, you see, jeans, and so they're physically oriented. So if you look, the clothing also gets finer and finer. If you notice, the masters wear silks, you see, and finer clothing. Because their bodies now, the atoms of these higher levels of consciousness are affecting their body, and they can't take the coarser materials against their flesh. So they have finer and softer things against their flesh, you see. Soulful beings, finer, softer things, you see, so on and so forth. So the fabrics get finer too. The denseness of the consciousness draws the denseness of the clothes. I see people running around here in heavy clothes. Yeah, and I see other people running around in very light clothes. You see, it's because it's due to their conscious level, what level they're identifying with. And so as you get, the self is pure, whole and all. It has no boundaries to it. But the personality will condition whatever the self is seeking to do on this dimension by its accumulation of the atoms of that plane of its expression. So the energy on that plane of expression, or the density of that plane of expression, will become qualified by these higher levels of consciousness. So the higher you get, the more it qualifies the lower levels of consciousness. When you're a spiritual being, it affects your body in a spiritual way. Like Jesus taking and after he was left the physical dimension and in his resurrection, he took and turned to light, and then he reversed that again to first come as an etheric body when he appeared to Mary, or in a physical body solid enough for Thomas to touch and for him to have a meal with them of fish for breakfast. He said and had breakfast with them after his ascension in the room. If you read the Bible, there it is. He had reversed the atom structure by becoming solid, so he could manifest the body in this dimension or not. Now, the body in this dimension is limited. But when it gets into these higher dimensions, it gets less and less limited until it identifies with its true nature as spirit, where it is formless, boundless, and infinite, and it's transcendental. It can touch any level of consciousness. You see, when you're in the clear consciousness, it's touching all the forms, whether they are the dense physical forms or atoms, the dense emotional forms or the emotional atoms, the mental atoms, so on and so forth. You see what I'm talking about now? Can you get this clear? Because it must be, you must come clear. See, the clear, still, white light. When we say still, clear, white light, it's not white like the color white. It is like clear, like a crystal. And so we're talking about a crystalline light, you see. And that's called the light of the Holy Spirit aspect that takes and touches all atoms, and is here surrounding and touching everything. Now, it isn't bound by form. So when on the 40th day after his resurrection, Jesus walking up the hill there and making the transfiguration, transfiguring, it meant he was lifting by his spiritual consciousness the atoms of his physical body, turning them to light. The atoms of his emotional body, turning them to light. The atoms of his mental body, turning them to light. He kept his identity as an individual being and turned each level to light. And if you notice, more spiritual beings are depicted with more light around them. So they glow with more light. People that are more physical, their skin is dull. Those that get more spiritual, they become more glowing. And so just look at the skin reflection of an individual. That's the first clue to see where they're at. If their skin is dull, it's the earth plane. And as it gets lighter and lighter, more translucent, more light showing from it, more spiritually orientated. And so the ability to transfer consciousness from one level to another and also incorporate and raise the other levels was the power of Christ, or the white light. Here. It can raise all these other levels from the earth. Why do they always say heaven's up there? Heaven's up there, you see. Well, really, heaven's right here because those atoms aren't just there. They come all the way to the surface. In fact, they go right through the planet. They're touching all the other atoms. And so it's by dimension by dimension by dimension, or plane by plane by plane, that you're transferring your awareness. You're no longer just paying attention to physical things when you are doing a transfer into the astral plane. You are now transferring that attention that you pay predominantly to the physical dimension to the astral plane. And that takes a while to make that transference, to start looking through that eyes, the astral eyes, rather than physical eyes. You see? That doesn't mean there's a pair of eyes that look like the physical in the astral body. It means your perception there is seeing the astral plane rather than your perception coming through these objects of perception known as the eyes, the objects of perception known as the eyes, seeing the physical dimension. So when you open up your astral eyes, you are opening into that plane. It's called astral because it looks like little pins and sparkly lights. It looks astral. Looks like it has little stars and stuff in it. And the beings in there appear that same way because they are more higher and finer in their construction than the density of the physical body. It's that simple. It's that simple. And as they get into the spirit body, that's even finer. And I've seen at the Universal Church of the Master over there, they have one group that take pictures of spirits, and they have them in their magazines and that. And they have one of an old man that's sitting in a chair like this, and he looks just like a transparent being sitting there because he's in a spirit body. He's no longer in a dense body like the physical body. Now, when you're in that other dimension, you are not subject to the physical laws. When you're in the astral plane, you're subject to the astral laws. When you're in the mental plane, you're subject to mental laws. When you're in the spiritual plane, you're subject to spiritual laws. So understand, the most restricted laws are the physical laws. And they get less restricted as you get into the finer bodies of consciousness. Meaning you're conscious in finer bodies. You see, it's that simple. So you're transferring your attention from this dense body to one that's a little less dense, to a little less dense, until you are perception in your spirit body. One of the spirit bodies we use is a little blue spark of light. And I don't know whether you've seen this yet. It's called the blue pearl. This little spark of blue light. And you're transferring your attention within that structure rather than in the structure of this physical body, to move in that structure. And you can move beyond this blue pearl to be pure perception, where you can perceive by the expansion or contraction of your awareness. And it is not bound by up or down or back or forth or any size. So you can look at the whole universe at once, or you can look at one atom or one part of the atom, you see, with this type of spiritual sight and light body travel. Now, if you notice, there's a mantra that we do in our aura expansion. It says, I am light and energy emanating in eternity. I am light and energy emanating in eternity. That's to transfer your attention from being a physical body with 2 legs and 2 arms and a head and a torso. You know, you could do that mantra. I'm my physical body. I'm physical. I'm physical. You know. Well, you've been saying that a long time. That's why you feel so solid, you see. But you would be solid on that dimension if you would say, I am light and energy emanating in eternity. You're transferring your attention from focus here to focus there. There is no time. There is no space. It's wherever you're paying attention. That's where you're at. Because you're everything. You're God experiencing Himself. You are everything. And God you can be in the whole body of God, or you can be in one ray of that body. Understand that. Wherever you're paying attention, that's where you're solid at. How many times have you been sitting in there after you've taken a trip and you're still on the trip, and somebody comes in and says something, you jerk. You snap back to physical consciousness. When you were there still flying, or still driving down the road, or still seeing the old scenery again. you see. You were traveling in another body of consciousness, but you're hung up on legs and arms and heads and torsos here because this body was constructed to operate on this planet in the physical universe, and it's not even constructed to operate on the planet Mars or some other planet because it is not constructed to do that. But the spirit body can go anywhere. The body of light can travel anywhere. Understand that. Now, as the earth is held to the sun by electromagnetic pull, a gravitational pull, a line of electromagnetic energy. That's a highway. And every line of light from every star that you see upon this planet, there's a line of light coming in it. There is a line of light coming to this planet, electromagnetic line. These become the highways of the universe. You understanding this? And so when you are in your body of light, you can travel upon that highway. Now there is no time, there is no space, so you can be 4.3 light years away from here in a matter of paying attention. In a matter of paying attention. See? Wherever you're paying attention, that's where you're at. You've heard me say this over and over again. So when you are in a light body projection, as we call it, or transference of your attention from here to your light body, which is the energy moving through this, the light moving through this, the one life, then you can be expanded or contracted in that. That's how I was able to go across the abyss. When I wanted to leave this nebulic system of its stars and planets and go to Andromeda and go to the other nebulas, Orion and many of the other nebulic structures, there's a great abyss there, or a place that appears like there is nothing. The very ability to perceive that is your way there. Your very ability to perceive is your way there. So as you're perceiving that, you're paying more attention to that where you're at, and you have a transference. Now, when I was doing this and had it at the physical level, I was doing teleportation at the physical level. You've read my book, First You're Here, Then You're There. This is the exact same principles I use. The Mother, Father, God coming through the various principles as I explained them in there. I raised the vibratory rate of the atoms of my physical body and saw them at another location. I kept seeing myself more there than I was here. And so my faith in movement, my lack of fear of the unknown, I knew I was indestructible because I was a spiritual being. I'm no longer the Son of Man, I'm the Son of God. I can experience in the universe. Christ showed me the way. Many masters have shown me the way. So I have faith in them. They did it. I can do it because I am a child of God just as they are a child of God. They're held in the image of God. I'm held in the image of God. When I surrender to that, I am that. I am that I am. I am that. Tetsit I am that. First you're here, then you're there. I am that. By identification, you are there. Identifying yourself there instead of here. Now, it wouldn't do for me to teleport this physical body to another planet. First of all, it's too dense, the atoms are too heavy to get off this planet without a great amount of push. And if you notice, they have to put them inside of a rocket ship that converts a lot of energy to make that push to get off this planet. The spirit body operates in a different way. Attraction, repulsion. It goes by attraction to these other places. The law of identification, by attraction, you transfer from one place to another. That place becomes attractive to you, and you no longer are here, so you repulse this place. I hate this place, I don't want this place to run. That isn't the kind of repulsion we're talking about. It's a natural repulsion when you have attraction. God is all attractive. God is all attractive, you know. Krishna, as they say in the Bhagavad Gita, is all attractive. God is all beautiful, you see, all attractive. So a lot of people took the physiological terminology of attraction and said, oh, they're beautiful, you see. That's the kind of attraction they related to, instead of the principal attraction. principle. Principle. This is the key, the principle of it. You see? And it can have different descriptions on different levels of experience. So when you want to start traveling, I had certain pass knot rings. Boy, I go to get off the planet, I couldn't get any further than I could jump. Then when I got out of the astral belt, in the astral plane, and in the lower part of it, I couldn't relate to floating around too far off the earth. Because I was afraid that, boy, I'd be thrown out into space and then maybe I'd never get back. See? I had those fears. And I'm sure if you're going to be doing this, you might have some of those same things come up. But Christ was fearless. He overcome the death, disease, and suffering, you see. Buddha overcame death, disease, and suffering. Krishna overcame pleasure and pain, you see. Each great master told us the same things to the people in the language they could understand it, relating it to what they understood. If you're talking to people that understand sheep and sheep herders and mountains and things like this and earth and streams, you start talking to them in that language so they can understand it. Now we're getting into atomic consciousness, so now we can talk into higher principles of atoms and light. But what about Adam, the first atom? Can you start seeing the first atom? Can you see what Moses was bringing us? Cosmic principle. Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve and their children. You see. The basic structure.
Simply rub your hands together, place them over your eyes. Notice the color you see. You can do this now.
Oh, sweetheart.
Blessings of light. Blessings. It's okay, just.
Blessings of light. What we'd like to share with you today is about our Astrophysics Daily Attunement tape series. In this tape series, you get to have the benefit of working with the group energy. There is no power like the group. More can be accomplished with others than can be accomplished by oneself. For this reason, at a special Teachers Intensive in Honolulu, Hawaii, we recorded our daily attunements for an entire week. Now you too can share with others in your daily practice of these attunements. Each morning we arose at 6 a.m. with the singing of the birds and the beautiful Hawaiian sunrise. You can hear the birds in the background even when you're doing these tapes. Whenever everybody is silent, the birds are there. It's beautiful. You can pick up on that essence that we experienced at that time. Chanting is a powerful part of the astrophysics teachings. It is to clear out negatives and affirm our true nature as sons and daughters of God. We call to the Christ and Masters and program in positive habit patterns. For the first half hour, we chanted. Then for the next half hour, we attuned to the rays of the day, Christ, the Masters, and the Archangels. Again, we affirmed through the spoken word our divine heritage, through calls, decrees, affirmations, prayers, and fiats. And then to complete the perfect circle, we went into our Rainbow Bridge meditation. Let us be your guest every morning. These daily attunements will change your life. To go along with these daily attunements, you'll want to have an astrophysics hand. God bless you and blessings of light.